get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down, all right? And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up, and then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down.
Heidi ho, sports fans, and happy Easter to all who celebrate. You are locked in for an excellent episode coming up of Kneecaps for Breakfast. Vince Progard, that's me. Happy to be joined, as always, by the man, the myth, the legend, Phil Byrne. And Phil, happy Easter to you, buddy.
Well, Vince, you're quite the man, the myth, the legend in your own right. Congratulations on getting a new role with University of Michigan Athletic Department there.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So, if you happen to be around U of M athletic fields, you hear a familiar voice, there's probably a good chance that is one Mr. Vince Progar.
That was indeed the case. Last couple of months, this has kind of been in the works, so I've called a few different sporting events for them over pretty much the last 8 weeks or so, and it looks like more opportunities are going to crop up. So appreciate the kind words, Phil, and look forward to seeing what comes of any future opportunities with them. But nonetheless, we got a show to do here, Phil. We only have 3 days until the 2025 edition of the NFL Draft. Is it just me, Phil, or is there a little bit less in the way of buzz surrounding this year's draft? And it could be because the Lions are picking so deep into the first round. It could be that we held the draft in Detroit a year ago. Now it's someplace else. So it's almost like there's a hangover, it seems like, over this year's draft. How do you perceive this draft, Phil, the way the masses are kind of getting jacked up or not for it?
Well, I mean, let's be honest. I think every draft is going to be different, right? And I think this draft, the heart of it, is what happens after pick 15 to pick 60. By that, I mean, you got probably 3 or 4 elite players and everyone else kind of in the middle ground there. There's really no elite quarterbacks. Again, you don't have it locally here. It's going to be in Green Bay. So I would assume, just because Green Bay is not much of a city, it's going to be at Lambeau for what their setup is. I haven't seen the ESPN or NFL Network, kind of stuff yet. But yeah, no, I think just all around, I think we know where the Lions need to go with their pick. There's not 1.5 million different options. So it just seems like there's less buzz, and it's probably because it's just not as intriguing as last year and everything that we had going into draft week last year.
So you and I are on the same page that there does seem to be considerably less in the way of hype around this year's draft, because by and large, I've heard next to no excitement about it, and I thought maybe I'm just not reading the room right. But if you agree with me, then that leads me to believe that's just how it is. So the Lions are indeed drafting late into the night on Thursday. Chances are, if you want to catch the Lions draft pick, you're going to have to stay up past 11 o'clock. So either that or hit record, go in the bubble, and make that the first thing you do on Friday morning after you wake up if you want to know who the Lions wind up taking with their first-round pick, unless, they trade up. So that is still something that's on the table. So what I want to know from you, Phil, is now that this is our final show before the draft actually takes place, I want to know your final thoughts on what you are going to be content, if not satisfied, with what the Lions do with that first round Thursday night selection, for first and foremost. And you'll get into that more specifically when you do your mock draft later in the show. But with the first pick specifically, and then on a more general level also, what you're hoping the Lions will be able to accomplish over the 3 days in Green Bay.
So first off, I think where the Lions are picking, and I think their area of need, and also kind of how most mock drafts or draft boards or players that seem to be around where the Lions are picking seem to be indicating that defensive end should be the spot. There's a number of really good defensive tackles too. that I think could be in consideration if some happen to fall, if some happen to be around. But here's the biggest thing: you pick at 28, you do not need a quarterback. I think this draft is all based around what happens with those quarterbacks. Now, by all accounts, it sounds like Tennessee is going to be going Cam Ward out of Miami with that first overall pick. What happens after that? Shador Sanders, Jackson Dart, Jalen Milrow. Maybe there's even a fourth guy, something like that. Do any of those guys go before the Lions pick at 28? The more that those guys would potentially go before the Lions pick at 28, of course, means that there's going to be other guys falling down to where the Lions pick. I think the other thing, too, is I think everyone loves Ashton Genty, the running back. We typically don't see running backs going in the top 10 anymore. He seems to be a consensus top 10 pick.
Which is
Could there
amazing
potentially-
because most people didn't watch him because he played at Boise State.
He played at Boise State, but he is just that good. I guess the other thing would be, are there going to be other skill position players that are also going to be going off the board? So those are two areas that I don't think the Lions need to focus their attention on in the first round. So basically, it's going to be where is your draft board looking at as you head into, say, pick 20, with where the quarterbacks, the receivers, and the running backs are going off the board. The more that those positions get picked, the higher likely it is the Lions are not going to have to go ahead and give up any sort of additional draft capital because one of the guys they might like might be sitting there right at pick 28. Or if it is a case they have to move up like one or two picks, again, that's not going to be a massive jump up. So I wouldn't anticipate the Lions jumping into the top 10 if I was sitting here right now and kind of making a prediction. But I also don't think it's going to be perfect where everything is going to just align accordingly. So that's kind of my 2 cents on it.
So what in terms of let's use position groups as our basis for this.
Yeah.
What would you be the most satisfied with the Lions coming away from position group X, Y, and or Z over the course of this draft in totality?
So you're saying more than just like the first round, basically. Like what
exactly. Yeah. Now that you kind of gave your insight on the first round, let's broaden out a little bit and just kind of use position groups as our basis. What do they need to accomplish over the 3 days?
So personally, I would like to see them double dip on that defensive line. If you go defensive end round 1, I think there's enough good defensive tackle depth in round 2 that could be there as well. Can you double dip and go get a defensive tackle in round 2 as well? Round 3 moving forward, I don't think it's any secret based on where I think this Lions' strength for their offense is. I've touched on it multiple times this offseason. Quite frankly, Graham Glasgow was not good towards the end of last season. And the fact that, we're going off of a very small sample size of Christian Mahogany and just kind of penciling him in as a week 1 starter, I think they need more help there. Frank Ragnow, how much does he have left in the tank? I think you could even extend that out further and say, quite frankly, on the offensive line, what do you have outside of Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell?
Even Decker could walk out the door at any moment. We don't know.
Exactly. So I have not seen enough from Manu that they drafted last year to feel confident that he is anything more than a project. I would anticipate he's going to play quite a bit in preseason, and we'll kind of have a little bit more of a judgment call there. But I think just coming from that small school that he came from in Canada, I just don't think it lended it to somewhere where you would feel confident even playing him in a regular season game at this point.
Can I take a hard left with this conversation real fast? Like, at what point
go ahead.
Is it going to take for us to be reassured that this Manu kid is not Darko 2.0? Because that's kind of in a weird way now that we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of the Darko incident. I mean, come on, or I think we're just past the 20th anniversary, rather. I'm seeing too many parallels almost. It's crazy.
Where you go complete upside, guy that really hasn't done anything, hoping that you can get a culture to help support growth and development, and you just have a lot of questions at the end of the day, right? So I
Anyway,
think there's
back
a
to what you were saying.
I think there's a lot of issues there, and then I also just think like at the heart of it, this draft is incredible on the offensive line if you aren't picking in the top 10, and that defensive line all over the place. And I think you were going to find great value in the second and third rounds where you can get potential starters in those spots. So um, I think we just need to be realistic where this offensive line is. And yeah, Penny Sewell, Frank Ragnow are generational talents. Taylor Decker is what, maybe a top 8, top 10 left tackle still in the NFL. But I think we need more help. I think we need more help at guard. And, I think that third round is where you start to look there. So to me, I don't think you have to go super flashy with this one. I think our skill talent on offense speaks for itself. I think we have enough depth. Um, and, the secondary is still young, but I haven't seen anything not to think that we need to go get a first round pick, at cornerback again or safety or anything like that. So that's just kind of my thought. I think you stockpile that defensive line, and then from there, maybe in the third, fourth round, what our picks might end up being here. I think that's where you go back to the offensive line and get some additional help there as well.
And I think you're on the right track with that. We all know that this regime built this thing from the line of scrimmage moving backwards on both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
And we saw what happens when you start to take away some of those building blocks. That's the foundation of the team. And when you tear away blocks from the foundation, everything above it comes crashing down. And we saw that it wasn't an immediate impact because we saw this team rattle off 15 wins over a 17 game regular season schedule. But you
Yeah.
kind of knew that eventually that whole building above the foundation was going to come down at some point, and you can play the blame game of who's most at fault for what happened in the playoffs, but the end result is still the same. The building above the foundation came crashing down. So I think you're absolutely right, Phil. I think you build up that defensive line because that was the clearest weakness on this team a year ago. And you really start to make a investment in making that offensive line unit younger, because it seems to me that it was probably the most dominant offensive line unit in football there for a little while, and that unit got real old real
Yeah.
fast aside from Sewell. And you're right, we don't have enough of a story on what to expect from Mahogany. Did he perform well enough in the starts he was given down the stretch a year ago? Yes, he did. But once the camera is on him as the guy instead of a guy that, hey, we don't have any game film on, we'll just see what we can do. Now you kind of know what you're up against if you're an opposing team from a scouting standpoint. So you got that to work against. And I think the position of the center is probably one of the more underrated positions in all of football. And if you don't have a clear-cut plan of what you're going to do with that position as far as the long haul, I think you're
Yeah.
more up against it than you think. I don't think we fully appreciate the fact that the Lions got it right with the center selection all those years ago. And that's one thing you got to give Quinn Trisha some credit for is
Yeah.
they did nail that pick as far as getting their center of the future. And we got a lot of good Quinn Trisha bad years aside. We got a lot of good winning football thanks to Frank Ragnow being pretty darn good at what he does. So I think if you can make it a point to go out and try and find the Frank Ragnow of the future in this year's draft, I think that's going to be in your best interest. What I do not want to see is I don't want to see high round capital being spent on offensive skill players. I think we've proven that we can go and find guys, whether it's later in the draft or guys that we can sign off a practice squad or something like that, that's going to step in and perform at a reasonable clip for us to where I don't see it necessary to go out and, hey, let's trade up and get this receiver, because let's be honest, receivers can be a dime a dozen. And you touched on it a little bit too, Phil. I don't know if the need really exists to go out and spend draft picks on the secondary. We still have two very young corners that we still don't fully know what to expect out of them. We saw what Terrion Arnold did when a gun was put to his head probably 2/3 of the season a year ago. In a perfect world, not nearly as much is going to be asked of him. So we don't know how is he going to perform in a situation where not as much is expected of him over a course of a season. So that's number one. And then, of course, number two is Rakestraw. We don't know what we're getting out of this guy, period. We
Yeah.
already have a decent situation going on in the safety room, and I just don't know if this is the draft to go out and just add luxury picks in the secondary. I think there are more pressing needs to build up this roster to where that's not where I would go. So that's kind of my 2 cents, Phil. I think we're both kind of simpatico here that we just
Yeah.
gotta get a little younger on the lines and get some fresher blood in there and build this thing back up to where we're not having to worry about signing guys off the street in the middle of the season because there are no guys left.
And that's so key. I think we've seen, maybe the hesitation to sign expensive free agents based on where this roster is headed, the contracts that they've already dealt out, the contracts that they will deal out or explore extensions on. And, I think you just have to, like, it needs to be that perfect hybrid and marriage of um, both need and where your board is at. But I also don't think at pick 28, based on how I've kind of seen this play out a little bit, that you're going to be reaching for any of these guys. Like, I think these are going to be guys that are getting picked right around where they should, which is good.
So, with that being said, we've held the same format over the course of this whole offseason as it pertains to previewing the draft. We've kind of spent a lot of time with the top 10. We've looked at what the other divisional opponents are going to do, and we looked at what the Lions are going to do. So, with that being the case, it is now time for the official Kneecaps for Breakfast, always famous, ever dangerous, Phil Byrne mock draft, the finale. Phil, take it away, my friend.
All right, here we go. So, the way that we're going to do this is we're going to go through the top 10 picks, and then we're going to hit on the NFC North. So, that will be the Packers, the Vikings, and the Lions. So, top 10, and then pick 23 with the Packers, pick 24 with the Vikings, pick 28 with your hometown Detroit Lions. So, there we go. This one not going to be much of a surprise. This is pretty much chalk. If you have looked at any of the mock drafts in the last month, it also seems like Tennessee has probably settled on this based on the draft discussion. So whether or not they use their full allotment of time or they go ahead and get a agreement, and you're going to see the Adam Schefters of the world report on it ahead of time, all signs are pointing to Miami quarterback Cam Ward going number 1 overall to the Tennessee Titans. So I'm not going to be a fool here and decide to switch things up. I'm going to go that way in that direction as well. So number 1, the Tennessee Titans are selecting Cam Ward. At 2, the Cleveland Browns. I think there's a variety of ways that they could go. They clearly need a quarterback of the future. But I think looking quarterback at number 2 overall in this draft, considering where the talent is too rich. So I think the Cleveland Browns at number 2 get one of the premium players in this draft. It's really going to be, what do you do with him? I think the Cleveland Browns are selecting Travis Hunter, the wide receiver cornerback out of Colorado. I, again, don't know how he is going to be used. I think he is great on both sides of the ball. He has the upside of Justin Jefferson as a receiver, maybe the upside of his coach and protege, Deion Sanders, on the cornerback side. So I would not anticipate that with the NFL being far different than playing in the Big 12, that he's going to be able to play literally every single down except special teams or even some special teams. But keep an eye on what the Cleveland Browns do because still not sure who they have outside of Joe Flacco throwing him the ball. So stay close to that. That brings up the third pick, the New York Giants. And they have a variety of ways that they can go. They can also address an overbearing quarterback need. But in my opinion, I think they have the option here to take who I think is the best player in this draft. That is going to be the defensive end out of Penn State, Abdul Carter. So he is following that lineage of wearing the number 11 jersey at Penn State. I think he is the most talented. He is going to be the perennial or early favorite to win Defensive Player of the Year. And he's going into a phenomenal situation with the New York Giants. Kayvon Thibodeau, Brian Burns, defensive tackle whose name is escaping me right on the
Sexy
tip of
Dexy.
There we go. Dexter Lawrence. So I think they're going to wreak havoc. That's going to be what the Giants team is going to be about. Reminding you of days of past with Justin Tuck and Michael Strahan, having Eli sling that ball on the other side of the field. So I think they go Abdul Carter there at number 3.
And I will interrupt for just a quick second,
Yeah.
Phil. I'll only be a second. That would be a phenomenal pick for the Giants if it does work out that way, because in most cases, if you pick somebody for the O-line or the D-line, that is basically lame duck regime proof, because you don't have to worry about a quarterback that you're drafting for one coaching style that another coach is going to come in and it's not going to jive right. If you bring in a guy like Carter to make this defensive line better and they decide to part ways with their GM or their head coach, it's really not going to upset the apple cart too much. So that's a great pick for the Giants if that's the way it actually unfolds.
And I think sitting there too, they're going to have their second round pick that's still pretty high up. I think they can still leverage getting one of the other quarterbacks in a trade up situation. As could Cleveland, quite honestly, at 2. I just don't think a quarterback at 2 or 3 is the right move there. Number 4, New England Patriots. This was a really interesting pick. If you go back to the last mock draft I had, I want to say the tackle that I had them selecting was Armand Membu. Kind of the difference of what happens with some of the workouts going from like the combine to pro days to just hearing the hype and conversations. Patriots could completely shock everyone here. So I'm just saying this not to rule it out completely. Ashton Jeanty has been getting a lot of buzz potentially to number 4 at New England. Of course, Vrabel having Derrick Henry all those years, completely different type of running back. But he's going to want to pound the ball quite a bit there with a running game. But I think at the heart of it, they have to go ahead and protect Drake May, their quarterback who they selected last year around the same selection. So I think they're going to go Will Campbell, the tackle from LSU, who kind of was the early on favorite to be the first tackle selected. And I think he's going to go back in that spot. Okay. So that brings up number 5 in Jacksonville. And I think there's, again, a team that could go a whole bunch of different directions here. They don't need a quarterback at number 5. So again, you're seeing these quarterbacks continue to slip a little bit, or maybe not slip, but just stay in the green room here for a little bit. I don't think they go quarterback here either. Instead, I think they go ahead and select the local product. Mentioned his name just a couple moments ago. I think the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to select Ashton Jeanty, the running back out of Boise State. Trevor Lawrence has really regressed the last 2 or 3 years. Travis Etienne is entering the last year of his contract in Jacksonville. I like this move. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think if you go and get the top skill position player in this draft, maybe you go ahead and find some ways to improve your team in the second round in some of those other areas, offensive or defensive line as well. So I have the Jaguars going Ashton Jeanty, running back, Boise State. So to recap the top 5, then we'll make our way through the bottom or the picks 6 through 10. Titans 1, Cam Ward. Browns pick 2, Travis Hunter. At 3, the Giants select Abdul Carter. At 4, New England, Will Campbell, the tackle out of LSU. And number 5, the Jacksonville Jaguars select Ashton Jeanty, running back, Boise State. All right, so that's how we stand there. That is bringing up the Las Vegas Raiders sitting there. And outside of Abdul Carter, all the defensive line options are waiting right there. No defensive backs have been selected. There's a variety of offensive tackles as well. Hey, maybe they shock the world and go Shedeur Sanders here. I think Tom Brady, who's been calling the shots, I've kind of led into this pick a little while, going back to our last one. I think he's going to have his Michigan roots come true in this one. I think the Las Vegas Raiders are going to give Max Crosby some help on that defensive line, and I think they go plug the inside of that line with Mason Graham, the defensive tackle out of Michigan. Pick 7, Aaron Glenn has a variety of ways that he can go ahead and improve his defense. But at the heart of it, he's got to get that offense moving a little bit better, right? And he, of course, has Justin Fields now as his signal caller. We'll see. I think he's going to get an opportunity to be the quarterback long term there. But there's one thing that you need when you have a quarterback that is going to run around a little bit. You need a better offensive line. And I think the New York Jets go with the other highly rated offensive tackle, still here on the board at pick 7. I think they go Armand Membu, tackle out of Missouri, at pick 7. The Carolina Panthers, pick 8. I'm just going to keep this one simple. I think they can go with a variety of ways to help that offense, but there's so many talented players available on that defensive line, and I think they get one from not too far away down in Athens, Georgia. I think they're going Mykel Williams. He's got great size. He was a standout on that defensive line. I think the Carolina Panthers go Mykel Williams, the edge out of Georgia. And now at pick 9, it gets interesting. The New Orleans Saints. Derek Carr. He is hurt. He is injured.
And nobody knows exactly how injured. There's been a lot of convoluted explanations as to what his actual injury status is. A little strange.
And I think they're a team that I think they obviously have Kellen Moore, new coach in there. I don't know what their direction is because I feel like they're a team that thinks they're closer than they truly are. I don't think they have, they've got some long-standing veterans on that team. But I think the issue is just they don't know, are they close? Do they think because they're in the NFC South that they're a couple picks away from possibly winning that division? I'm not quite sure. But I know at the end of the day, they need a quarterback. I don't know if I would make this pick per se, but Deion Sanders made a comment recently that his favorite colors are black and gold, obviously referencing his Colorado Buffaloes. And I think his son is the pick right here. I am going Shedeur Sanders, number 9 overall, to the New Orleans Saints.
Which means our second quarterback doesn't come off the board until pick number 9.
Pick 9. Yep, so 2 go in the top 10. So that would mean in most people's rankings would have Jackson Dart, the quarterback out of Ole Miss, as the best remaining quarterback. All right, pick 10, the Chicago Bears. I think this is a pretty easy pick for them based on how this board has fallen. I think they're going to make it 2 players from Penn State going in the top 10. I think they're going to take Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State, with pick 10. With him, yes, they do have a couple of tight ends on their roster. Cole Kmet. They've obviously invested heavily onto the receivers in there. But when you talk about the struggles that Caleb Williams had, a lot of it was underneath passes, things in the slot, especially if he's running around. Tyler Warren is going to be an incredible safety blanket for Caleb Williams. I think he's the pick here at number 10, and Ben Johnson gets a top-end tight end to plug into that offense as well. So, top 10, running through this one more time. Titans, 1, Cam Ward. Browns, 2, Travis Hunter. Giants, 3, Abdul Carter. Patriots, 4, Will Campbell. Jaguars, 5, Ashton Jeanty. Raiders, 6, Mason Graham. Jets 7, Armand Membu. Panthers 8, Michael Williams. Saints 9, Shador Sanders. And the Chicago Bears at 10, going Tyler Warren. So that's
Okay,
the
so
top 10.
before you get to the remaining three in the NFC North, besides
Yeah.
Cam Ward, which there seems to be a pretty heavy consensus that he's going to be the pick at number one,
Yeah.
out of all the rest of those picks, Phil, what are you the most confident in? Which singular pick, aside from the
Yeah.
one overall, are you the most confident that that scenario is going to play out?
The one that I would do at this point in time, I think would be the second pick. I think it will be Travis Hunter going to Cleveland. I think from all talk out of Cleveland, unless it is a total smokescreen, they do not want to necessarily pair up Abdul Carter with Myles Garrett, which would be my pick, instead of going Travis Hunter there. So I guess then after that, Abdul Carter being pretty much a slam dunk pick for the Giants at 3. So I think the top 3 is pretty set in stone as we're looking right now. I think you get to pick 4 with the Patriots. That's when things are going to really start to get interesting.
Gotcha.
Right.
All right. NFC North.
NFC North. Okay, so we have the Green Bay Packers at pick 23. I think there's a lot of defensive line that they could get some help in. I thought about Will Johnson or Jade Barron, a couple defensive backs that could help this team out. But at the heart of it, and an issue that they have not addressed with a pick dating back to Aaron Rodgers, the Green Bay Packers go and get my favorite wide receiver in this draft class at pick 23. It is not Travis Hunter. It is not Tedoroa McMillan. It is Matthew Golden, the receiver from Texas. He ran a 4.29 40 time at the NFL Scouting Combine in Indy. And if you watch his highlights, Quinn Ewers underthrew him all the time. But he is one of these guys very much in the same route of a Steve Smith of yesteryear, of Amon-Ra St. Brown in today's NFL, where you get him in some space, especially in the slot, and he is absolutely going to dice up and pick apart a secondary. He was extremely productive at Houston. He was supposed to be the number 2 at Texas last year. He came in and absolutely took over that top spot from Isaiah Bond, who many thought was the number 1 receiver at Texas. So I think the Green Bay Packers get Jordan Love some help at receiver, and I think they go Matthew Golden right there with that one.
Add another young receiver to the already young group of receivers on that team.
Exactly. Pick 24, Minnesota Vikings. So I think the biggest question mark with the Minnesota Vikings, in my opinion, is still like, what are you getting out of J.J. McCarthy? Is Aaron Rodgers going there, not Pittsburgh? What I do know, they always like those versatile players on defense, and I think they get the Swiss Army knife from South Carolina, the safety, Nick Amanwari. He's like 6'3", 210, 215 pounds. You can bring him into the box even though he is a safety. And I just feel like at the heart of it, it is going to give that defense another toy to play with, especially when you look at some of the offensive weapons that the other teams in the division are starting to put up. So back-to-back picks, 23 Packers, Matthew Golden, wide receiver Texas. Pick 24, Minnesota Vikings, Nick Amanwari, safety, South Carolina. All right, so we kind of alluded to it. Pick 28, the Detroit Lions. So before we get into the Lions pick, I've kind of narrowed who I want them to target. Some guys that I think are going to be there at pick 28. But some 4 names that I think we as Lions fans should see. Are they going to go off the board before pick 28? Where the quarterback's going to go? The first one, the local kid, we talked about him going back a couple months now. Defensive tackle Derek Harmon out of Oregon. And then 3 defensive ends that I really like. Defensive end Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. Defensive end Mike Green out of Marshall. And defensive end James Pierce out of Tennessee. Mike Green and James Pierce, probably the most athletic when it comes to pass rush arsenal, having pretty good production in the case of Mike Green. But Mike Green and James Pierce both have some off the field questions. So that's something to keep an eye on as they continue to slide a little bit. Pick 28, the Detroit Lions go back to Dan Campbell's alma mater and select Shamar Stewart, the defensive end out of Texas A&M, at pick 28. So what you're getting in Shamar Stewart is a guy that doesn't have a ton of production, but he has the measurables. And if you watch his tape, you still see a disruptor. Can't explain it other than the fact that Texas A&M has a ton of other draftable talent that is in this draft or was in last year's draft. But he is about 6'5", 265, has some really good pass rush moves. And I think he's a guy that I would feel confident in moving forward for the long term on the other side of Hutch. And when you get a guy like Hutch on the other side of you, your production, your numbers, your stat totals, and things like that will increase. He's a guy that you can get on the field for all 3 downs. You don't have to worry about him being a pass rush specialist. I think his numbers are going to be something that keeps him around to pick 28. And he's not a top 10, top 15 player. But I like what you see with Shamar Stewart. And if I had to pick a guy right here with those 4 all being on the board, I would go Shamar Stewart.
Interesting pick. Interesting pick.
Yeah.
And Texas A&M, of course, is kind of known for an underrated defense. You know, you always get the top talent going to Texas A&M. You seem to get good coaches, position coaches at Texas A&M. It just seems like from a team standpoint, they can't seem to put it all together to go out there and win anything, but the individual parts is kind of better than the sum of the individual parts, if that makes sense.
I think James Pierce, when you look at like a pure upside pick, is maybe who you go with, but the off the field stuff
problems
really scares me with him. You know, if he was one that was around in like mid second round and you want to double up and just say the heck with it, let's just go get 2 guys, I could see a move like that happening. Mike Green also with some of those off the field issues as well, but yeah, I think at the heart of the day, Shamar Stewart, the worst thing that you could say about him was just that he didn't have a ton of production, but he was in on a lot of plays. He was beating his guys on the offensive line all the time. He's clearly not a step too slow. He had, I think, a top 5 40 time as a defensive end, even at 6'5", close to 270. So he's a really, really good athlete too. So I think he just kind of has enough of the intangibles you're looking for. And quite honestly, those 4 on there, I'm sure Dan Campbell would love to get a Nagy in the building as well.
Amen, brother. You're listening to this episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. Vince Progar making the magic happen with Phil Byrne, breaking down the 2025 NFL Draft. Great stuff by you, Phil, on your first round, as well as the NFC North predictions for this year's draft. Let's take it a step further. What do you have to keep a watch on for the later rounds? Because, of course, the first round is what gets all the hype and the notoriety. There's still 2 more evenings into a 3rd day of draft coverage to keep an eye on as well. So what do you have on those?
So we talked on it. If you go defensive end or defensive line in that first round, I think you have to go back second round and address the offensive line. Get someone that you're going to feel a little bit better at long term as either a long term play opposite Penei Sewell as a tackle. Maybe you can go to one of the guard or center spots. I don't, you know, it is kind of crazy to think that offensive line is a need, but here we are. So if you go tackles, 2 guys to keep an eye on that should be around in the second round that are pretty good kind of size, strength, projecting as, you know, maybe not like high-end starters, but guys that could definitely start. And I think that's better than what we have on the roster currently. 2 tackles that I would like to take a look at or keep an eye on. Anthony Belton out of NC State, and kind of the same area of the country, guy by the name of Charles Grant from William and Mary. And then the interior offensive line, two guys to keep an eye on. I think I mentioned him the last time. Tate Ratledge out of Georgia. He can play both guard and center. And then Donovan Jackson out of Ohio State, who is a guard. So I think all four of those will be outside the first round. Again, you start talking quarterbacks flying off the board. Maybe some start to do it in late first round. Maybe the Eagles or the Chiefs or one of those teams trades back. Someone goes ahead and picks a quarterback. That's going to allow some of these guys to fall a little bit further than they normally would. So that's where we would look there for kind of day two. And then I think the other thing is I don't really have names for them, but as much as you don't want us to talk skill position, I think there is a conversation to be had. What are we going to do with Jameson Williams? Because if you look at what some of Brad Holmes' comments were, or even go back to the show that we were talking about it down at that Florida owners meeting, it doesn't seem like other priority players of who's going to get that next contract. I think it's Hutch. I think it's Kirby Joseph. But I don't think JMO is necessarily there.
He
so
just hasn't been in that conversation.
He hasn't. So don't be shocked if, fourth, fifth round, wherever we're picking, if the Lions do go ahead and draft a receiver. Not as like a long-term starter or anything like that, but just in case you need, some extra arsenal, moving forward. So we'll see. We'll see with that.
So I have to turn this back around on you, Phil. So
Yeah.
you went out of your way to throw out a guy on the offensive line by way of William and Mary. So right now, without Googling or looking it up, who is the one player on this Lions current roster on the offensive line that went to college at William and Mary? Go.
Oh, that's Colby Sorsdal, right?
That's right. Ding, ding,
There
ding,
we go.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah.
Charlie, tell him what he's won.
Absolutely nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Nope, that's good pull by you. Yes, Colby Sorsdal. So, yeah, another member of the tribe joining the pride. That would be interesting. Yeah. Anyway.
Yep.
So great stuff by you, Phil, and
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing how this all plays out. But this has always been one of the many things that you are talented at touching on and talking about. You have impressed me with your ability to break down a draft going back 15 plus years that you and I have been doing this type of thing together. So it's been a lot of fun hearing your analysis week in and week out. So I'm going to be curious to see how it all plays out.
It's a lack of hobbies. I'll be honest. It's a lack of hobbies. I probably need to go do more outdoor activities and sports. So,
but yet here we are. And
here we
you know
are.
what? If you played a few extra rounds of golf, you and I probably wouldn't be doing this. And so let's not change things up too much. Okay, Phil, let's have a little bit of fun with the draft. We did some hard-hitting analysis, some straight-edge analysis, if you will, and let's kind of get into something a little bit more laid back and relaxed here. So what I want to roll out here is the burning questions. See what I did there? Burn, BYRNE questions.
He's on fire.
Yeah.
Oh, exactly. That's a pun on a pun. There we go. Okay.
Is that like dividing by 0 or something? Like you just can't do that? I don't know. But so let's get into some questions though, Phil. So I want to know, because the NFL's changed quite a bit over the years. We'll confine this to a 25-year window here. I want to know for starters, who is the best draft pick that you've seen in a draft in the last 25 years? It can be any player, it can be any position group, it can be any round, it can be any individual selection. The best pick that you've seen in a draft in the last 25 years.
Okay, so I guess technically this would be after Brady. So I think Brady would have been the easy one to go to just in terms of like where he was picked and the success.
Yeah, because he was drafted past the 25-year mark.
Yeah. So I feel like this is going to be a lot of recency bias. Um, you think about him rattling off all the players drafted before him. There were 111 players drafted in the 2021 NFL Draft before the Detroit Lions selected Amon-Ra St. Brown out of Southern Cal. Because the way that I think about this is look at how many in that draft, receivers alone, went in the top 10. So you have an immediate value. You look at the Lions 2021 draft, and he was their fifth selection. They had Penei Sewell. They had Levi Onwuzurike. They had Aleem McNeil. And what people might forget is that Ife Melifonwu actually went before Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yep, and he's no longer part of the group anymore.
He's no longer part of the group. I think if you look at the production, I think, he was a guy that didn't have the elite traits or elite measurables to go super high, but he was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school, going to Southern Cal. He had a pretty productive career at Southern Cal. People just couldn't figure out how to go ahead and put him into a box. He is now one of the highest paid players in the NFL. I think he's the heartbeat of this Lions team. And I think he helped set an identity along with Penei Sewell in that 21 draft class to build this roster, this team, this organization moving forward. So for me, again, a little bit of a recent bias pick here. I would say Amon-Ra St. Brown. If you want to talk all time, I think it is Tom Brady. I think that goes without question where he was picked and things like that as well. There's been a great number of guys selected in the first round that you can think, I'll think about the career that this person had or this person. I think the crazy thing about the draft is most number one overall picks 5 years down the road are not the top player in the draft. It is so hard to be a number one overall pick and just have the type of career that is expected out of that position. And a lot of times you're drafted to a team that isn't that good. You'll have a coach, you'll have a general manager, guys like that fired as well. So for me, again, recency bias here, but I'm going to go Amon-Ra St. Brown.
He's recency bias and he's a homer. You got to love it.
Yeah.
But that's a great point, Phil, about the number one overall pick, because I'm sure if you were to ask casual, not the nuts who do nothing but are glued to their phones and reading the ESPN or Fox or NFL.com articles, the average football fan could not go 10 to 15 years back and rattle off in order all of the number one overall picks, just because most of them, it's a coin flip if you're completely honest about it. So that's why I was interested to hear what you had to say, not just from a first overall pick standpoint, not just from a first round standpoint, but from an entire draft standpoint. And St. Brown kind of checks all those boxes because let's be honest, how many all-pro guys are there that were taken that late in the draft? Not too many. Not too many.
I would say if you want to talk last 25 years as well, guys that weren't number one overall picks, I think the three quarterbacks that I think most would consider to be elite in the NFL now, with Mahomes, with Josh Allen, with Lamar Jackson, where those guys were picked as well. Those were incredible picks that set the foundation. You had guys like Josh Rosen drafted before many of them in that draft that didn't amount to diddly squat in the NFL.
He might as well have been Sam Rosen out there. Everybody out.
Yeah, sorry, I'm dying over here. No, exactly. So that's my pick. I still think for the value for what you got, I think for the foundation that was set, for being the heartbeat of this football team, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is definitely up there for top draft picks.
So let's flip it around, Phil. Biggest draft bust in the last 25 years. So this is probably going to be obviously near the top of whatever draft you select.
So I included my biggest Lions draft bust.
Sure,
But
I'll take the bonus points.
I will also, so I'm gonna go ahead and do this in a couple different ways. My worst Lions pick, and then also the worst top 10 of any NFL draft here. So 2019, Detroit Lions in the first round, Bob Quinn, Matt Patricia, they selected TJ Hawkinson. That is not the pick. He was all right. Again, don't like taking maybe where his career has gone at pick number 7, but yeah, credit to him. He's at least had a nice career to this point.
He was more of a asset than Eric Ebron ever was at the position.
Absolutely. The second round pick, though, is where I'm going. Jelani Tavai. Now, Kyle Vinoy is often kind of put in the same category as Jelani Tavai. Kyle Vinoy has had a hell of a career. For some reason, I don't know if it was a scheme fit. I don't know if it was motivation. As soon as he got to New England, he absolutely turned his career around. Jelani Tavai did absolutely nothing here. And not only was it an incredible reach when they drafted him, Mel Kiper did not have his research ready and available when the Lions selected Jelani Tavai. And then when digging in and finding a little bit more research, he was picked at pick 43. That is not towards the end of the second round. That is damn near a first round pick that the Detroit Lions decided Jelani Tavai is going to be our pace setter on defense. And he was too slow for the defense that we were trying to play at that point in time. Now, he is still in the NFL. Last check, I think he's bounced around a couple teams. He may still be in New England. But to me, that is one of the most difficult draft busts that I have seen. And at that point in time, before Brad Holmes came in, it seemed like every second round pick that we were making, nothing happened with them.
Well, yeah, and that would be my pushback is that, and we're splitting hairs here, of course, but at least Tavai made it on another NFL roster and I believe is still part of the Patriots organization.
Yeah.
You look at a guy like Teez Tabor, who did nothing here. I don't believe he ever did anything anyplace else. But
he
again,
was a tease.
You're splitting hairs. Splitting hairs of suckitude.
Real name Jalen, by the way, Jalen Tabor. That's what he was when I was in Florida before he decided to go by Tease.
That's some insider nuggets right there, Phil.
Yeah, yeah. But then also, I just want to replay this because I think this is fun. The 2013 NFL Draft. Do yourself, if you happen to really like the NFL Draft, do yourself a favor and go back on that draft. I'm going to rattle off the top 10 as well as the first quarterback selected in this draft. And as much as we want to complain about what the 2025 draft looks like, I can at least guarantee that we don't have something that looks like this. Number 1 overall pick. Ladies and gentlemen, fire up chips. This was the year that Eric Fisher went number 1 overall to the Kansas City Chiefs. And it was kind of a process that I think most people considered him going into his final year in Mount Pleasant to be that, first round, maybe borderline second round kind of pick, a guy that was definitely heading in the right direction. He had a really great offseason of workouts and played his way into getting selected by Andy Reid in Kansas City with the number 1 overall pick. Here's the problem, though. Pick 2, Jacksonville, Luke Joeckel. He was a tackle. If you were like, who is that guy?
That's a joke.
Number 2 overall. Number 3, I think it was Miami, Dion Jordan. Number 4, Lane Johnson, who actually was probably the guy that went number 1 overall to the Eagles. He is still playing. Number 5, your Detroit Lions select Ziggy Ansah. Number 6, here we go. Here's a name. Barkevious Mingo. Yes, that Barkevious Mingo.
Browns? He went up to the Browns?
He played at LSU. I honestly don't remember what team. I think it was Cleveland, though, yeah.
Yeah.
Number 7, Jonathan Cooper. Yes, that Jonathan Cooper.
Wasn't he the head coach at Ohio State eons ago?
John Cooper. Yeah. Here we go. This just gets downright comical. Number 8, Chicago Bears, Tavon Austin.
Isn't he dead?
I hope not.
Like, honest to God, I thought he got murdered like a year or two ago. You keep
Maybe.
you keep talking, and I'm gonna real time confirm this.
Number 9, D. Milliner. D. Yep. You make your own joke about his name, D. We'll leave that one off the pod. Number 10, Chance Warmack. And your first quarterback selected in this draft, I think he was picked 16 overall, EJ Manuel from Florida State. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a tipped over porta potty. That that is helping no one and just reeks.
And to clarify, I'm sorry, Tavon Austin, very much alive. It was his teammate at West Virginia, Stedman Bailey, that got shot but survived just a couple of years ago. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put that out there in the universe. Nobody's dead.
I don't know how we recovered from that, Vince.
I don't know either.
Okay, so here's the thing. That was a lot of bad, but here's this draft. The Lions actually did have a really, really solid pick, Darius Slay. He was in this draft. Travis Kelce also in this draft. He got in the same draft with Eric Fisher, DeAndre Hopkins, and Tyrann Mathieu. So what we're saying here is in most drafts, there's going to be 4 or 5 guys that you can count on to be kind of all pro level. I don't know what happened with the draft analysis or the player comps or what happened there in 2013. But that is an all-time stinker of a first round of the top 10. And some of that could be just there was no quarterback that anyone thought was worthy of a top 10 pick when EJ Manuel, of all guys, was the first quarterback selected.
Biggest surprise in the NFL draft over the last 25 years. It could be a good surprise. It could be a not so good surprise. It could be a surprise that took place anywhere in the draft.
Biggest surprise. Well, I think last year with Atlanta going Michael Penix, I think it's definitely up for comparison. They just put in that big deal to Kirk Cousins. Here locally, I think the most surprising Lions pick, I think you'd be hard-pressed to argue in the first round at least, anything outside of Eric Ebron because of who was still on that board and some of the guys that, we could have had that. I feel like anytime Ebron started to struggle, we just had to look at who was there. So that draft, we picked Eric Ebron ahead of Aaron Donald, Odell Beckham Jr., Zach Martin, and Taylor Lewan. Most surprising. I think you could also think back to the then Washington Redskins when they went and had Robert Griffin III as the number 2 overall pick, and then actually
gave up a lot to get him.
They went ahead and gave up a lot to get him, but then later on in that draft, I can't remember if it was a second or third round pick, but they went ahead and drafted Kirk Cousins as well. You don't see that too often where a team goes ahead and puts 2 picks on a quarterback, within the first 3 rounds as well. So that's kind of what I would say. Do you kind of have a most surprising pick, Vince? What are you feeling?
I think you can kind of tie question 2 and question 3 together from a bust standpoint. You look at a lot of those number 1 overall picks that we talked about and how many of them just didn't pan out. And looking back in hindsight, of course, it's almost like, what's up with that, Or you could even look at the year that Hutchinson got drafted. You look at Jacksonville taking Trayvon Walker with the number 1 overall pick when you have Hutchinson staring you right in the face. I think you can look at what a lot of teams chose to do with that number 1 overall pick. And right now it's looking like Cam Ward is the consensus number 1 overall pick. It would be a big surprise if they went in a different direction with a different position on the field other than quarterback. Doesn't have to be, again, good surprise or not so good surprise, just has to be a surprise. Question number 4 on the 5 burning NFL draft questions here. What, in your mind, is the most loaded draft class over the last 25 years? Which year has had the best talent come out in that year's draft?
Um, Good question here. For the Lions, I will say it is that 2021 draft class. If I'm kind of cheating around here a little bit, Penei Sewell, Libe Onzuwerke, Liam McNeil, Ifeanyi Mfonu, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Derek Barnes, the very next pick after Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Jamar Jefferson. Lions getting 3 Pro Bowlers out of that, and 3 guys on defense that have started a number of games. It's pretty good. So I think, you know what, though, I really did like that 2021 draft in total, because you look at where that first round was at. I know the quarterbacks weren't super great that year, but I know you had Tua, you had Justin Herbert, you had the LSU receivers that were in that one. I think that is still one of my favorite drafts that I have seen, and I think it was one of those ones. So a lot of teams could have picked better or found an Amon-Ra St. Brown and picked them higher. But I think that was one of the deepest classes that I can remember of all time. Jamar Chase in that draft class, plenty of good wide receiver talent in that one.
I know I'm answering my own question here, and this isn't about me, but I do want to chime in going a little further back. I would say that 2011 draft class, if you think about it, was about as stacked as it could get. And it's kind of interesting because you and I were in college when these guys were in college. So we were watching these guys play college football when we were in
Oh, yeah.
college. And then when we left, they were in the NFL. So you're looking at J.J. Watt, Richard Sherman, Cam Newton, Von Miller, A.J. Green, Patrick Peterson, Julio Jones. I think if I recall, I'd say at least half the guys who were drafted in the first round wound up going to the Pro Bowl at least once. So I know we're nowhere near that in the day and age where guys are getting extra eligibility or leaving early.
Yeah.
You're not getting like these loaded draft classes anymore. But if I had to answer that question, that's probably the route I would take. Last question for you, Phil, is if you could make any change to
Yeah.
the current format of the NFL draft, it could be any change to the current format of the NFL draft, what would you change about it?
So it is a made for TV event, but they have always done a lot to try to entertain, to keep people interested for the uh, people that are attending the draft, to watching it in person. Again, I took it in last year. It was a fantastic event. Didn't get out to night one, but got out to the second and third day. It was pretty fantastic. But one thing that they have done in recent years as they've gone on location is once you get past the first round and it's Roger Goodell making all the picks, or maybe like a notable cause here or there for some of them, there are way too many personality or quote unquote celebrity picks that just absolutely stall. They either try to make fun of the local team, the local audience, hype up their team. There's that one guy that will
Or
always
piss
come
on the
out
local team's rival or something?
yeah, and kind of like egg on like the Dallas Cowboys and stuff like I don't know. So what I would do is I don't know what they need to do to keep the audience, you know, in tune day 2 and day 3. For the TV product, I want to have more college football coaches doing interviews and calling in. I'm talking about some of the guys that have been selected. It doesn't have to be a school that necessarily is having multiple guys get drafted, but I think it would be a great opportunity to spotlight some of the schools, especially in this day of NIL. And you know, I think about like years of teams of yesteryear for our Central Michigan Chippewas and some of the offensive linemen that they've been able to draft. Like it would have been an awesome opportunity to have the head coach at the time be able to talk about Central Michigan and talk about how cool it was to have these guys for a number of years and get drafted. And just putting more of a spotlight on some of the college football coaches, maybe some additional interviews coming in from NFL coaches from time to time. But some of the day 2 and day 3 stuff, it takes away from a little bit of the thing, or they'll do the international calls, or like a bird or someone like that making a pick, and you're like, what am I even watching? Like, this is so bizarre.
Or you cut
So
over
that would
for
be
more
what I would do.
Desmond Howard analysis.
Yeah, so yeah, this guy,
Yeah, go blue.
he's great. Yeah, so that's what I would do personally. What about you, Vince? What do you got?
I think the issue that arises is because, like you said, it's all made for TV, so it's great for the first night, and I think they did a good thing by making the first night all about the first round, and they
Yeah.
made the second night all about the second and third round. I kind of think that is the third day really necessary to televise? I mean, because you're talking 6 hours worth of just over and over again, pick after pick after pick, and it almost seems like it's just an automated loop at that point. And
Yeah.
does anybody really know enough about who's getting taken with the 189th overall selection in this year's draft? I don't know. It almost seems like it could take place maybe off site without even having to have people around. I don't know. Are you making it a fully made for TV event or not? And it just doesn't seem like the third day has any TV sex appeal to it whatsoever. So maybe it's not so much a change, more so just kind of asking a rhetorical question about the process.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
But the biggest thing to keep in mind, though, Phil, is that this is the last time that we will be able to talk about this Lions organization in its current form, because next episode, this team's going to look different for the first time, really, since the offseason. They've added a couple of guys through free agency here and there, but by and large, it's just been more of the same, bringing aboard depth pieces. Now we're getting a firsthand look at a number of guys who you hope are going to be able to step in and help right away. So it's exciting.
It is exciting. And, I think we've gone from an organization and a city that this was our event, and you even looked at when it was here last year. And now it's kind of like one of these, okay, well, we'll see how this develops. We'll see how this plays out. And it is a unique experience being in this position that we're in, where, we're going to have to wait till 10:30, 10:45, 11 o'clock if the Lions, stick and pick at 28 without moving up or down. So it could be a long night Thursday night, but if you are a fan of college football and the NFL, it's always fun to watch where these players go, some of the storylines, and especially having all three division rivals go before your Lions, kind of seeing who they end up with as well.
100%, and I can guarantee you that I will be up for the whole thing, and I'm sure all Lions fans are going to probably make it pretty easy to stay up for the whole thing, regardless of when the pick takes place, because the first round of the draft has kind of always been our Super Bowl. Even though we have real Super Bowl aspirations on our plate as we speak, there's always been something synonymous with Lions fans and the first round of the NFL draft. So it's going to be exciting to see what happens. And we, of course, will break it down next week. That is the story for us on this episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. It's been a lot of fun previewing the NFL draft. And again, we are excited to see how it all unfolds. Phil and I will be right back here next week to break it all down bit by bit with you. For Phil Byrne across the way, Vince Progar saying good morning, go Lions, forward down the field, over and out.